I think let's get started. So welcome again to today's virtual panel discussion on PKI and Certificate Lifecycle Management. I'm Sowesha and I'll be your moderator for today's session. So we have two panelists joining us today, Jeff Hagen, Lead PKI Security Engineer at Xcel Energy, and Murali Palanisamy, Chief Solutions Officer at AppViewX. So before we get into the session, I wanted to go over some quick housekeeping items. So today's session is scheduled for 30 to 45 minutes, followed by a dedicated Q&A session. We'll also be conducting polls during the session, and we look forward to all your participation in them. We'll reveal the poll results at the end of the discussion and the session today. During the course of the presentation, you can also type in your questions at any time through the Q&A option that you have. We'll probably address them at the end of the session, and Murali and Jeff will get to that. And a recording of this session will also be available on our website in case you want to watch it again or share it with your colleagues. So I think as viewers continue to trickle in, I was hoping we can spend a few seconds just to check if there's anything specific that you want, as a takeaway from today's session. You can ping us via the Q&A option or the chat option just to let us know if you had anything specific in mind, a specific desired learning outcome, and we'll ensure that we address it. Great, I think we'll just move on to the session now. So Murali, over to you to take us forward.
All right, thanks, Sowesha. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everybody, depending on where you are. So today, we're going to talk about a couple of interesting stuff, especially we're going to look at Xcel Energy, what they have done, their PKI environment, how they've set up. And we look at what drove them to explore an automation solution for their certificate and key management, right? And what was the business reasons, business goals, and the implementation thought process that they had. And then we'll also look at AppViewX and how certificate lifecycle automation with AppViewX as a platform would help. And then we'll also touch upon a little bit of best practices and talk about some of the cautious list that we need to be aware of. And then at the end, we will spend some time to have Q&A and then have some closing thoughts from Jeff. So with that, I have Jeff joining us, Jeff Hagen from Xcel Energy. Welcome, Jeff.
Well, hi. Thank you very much, Murali. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about Xcel Energy. Xcel Energy is a top 10 energy provider in the United States. We supply energy in 8 states to 4.3 million customers. That's for our electric, and over 2 million individuals for gas. And I know that there's some other energy providers with us on the line today, and I appreciate you joining with us and hope that this can be of benefit as we share a bit of a similar struggle. Audits, audits at Xcel Energy, it seems like they happen about every 6 weeks. And we are regulated by the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, otherwise known as NERC. We also have the Department of Homeland Security is in charge of overseeing our critical infrastructure protection program. So we do have a highly regulated environment that also includes 2 nuclear plants. In addition, we're building out a $562 million build out of our smart grid management system. A couple components in there are considered ADMS, Advanced Distribution Management System, as well as AGIS, which is the Advanced Grid Intelligence and Security. The functions of NERC include things like reactor safety. This is also the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Reactor safety, security, reactor licensing, and we do operate in multiple data centers. And things to keep in mind are security, reliability, and availability are absolutely, they're paramount to our business. We are also deploying into a DevOps multi-cloud environment. So there's a number of challenges that we face at Xcel Energy, and like any corporation, we move awfully fast, and at the same time, things have to be quite mature. So let me tell you a little bit about our the Xcel Energy, kind of the IT and PKI background here. So certificate and key management falls under the identity and access management team, which is a component of cybersecurity. At Xcel Energy, we wisely, several years back, we took our chief security officer out from under the CIO, and we gave that individual a seat at the table. And so, again, just to stress the importance of security and cybersecurity at our company. By the way, that also, physical security also does fall under the chief security officer. We also have our application support teams play a critical role in certificate lifecycle management. After all, it's those individuals that are ultimately responsible for their own systems, as well as the TLS certificates that are deployed onto their machines. So when certificate expirations come up, for example, it's really up to those individuals to raise the request and ultimately to deploy their signed certificates onto their individual machines. So, Murali?
Yeah, Jeff.
I think you had a question that was lined up here.
Yeah, so the standard obstacles, or rather, the standard challenges that any environment or an enterprise.
We certainly did. Our project that we ran in 2018, it went through kind of its fits and starts, and we're faced with some pretty significant numbers. We had dozens of local traffic managers. We've had, although it was completely not known to us, in the end, we've got 80,000 certificates throughout our network, tens of thousands of servers, 12,000 employees. So those are all, pretty significant numbers. And the obstacles that we're facing, first and foremost, was the manual configuration errors. We had, an 80-page document complete with screenshots, but, very error-prone. And this would be something that our application support folks would go through maybe every 2 years. So they would spend about all day, 8 hours going through this, and they'd probably get it wrong once or twice, and then finally at the end of the day they'd get it in, and they'd put the document away for 2 more years. Also, we did have a SHA-1 based environment, and so in order to move to that SHA-2 based environment, we ended up redeploying our entire PKI from the ground up. And even though root certificates or root servers don't require a SHA-2 based, our vulnerability scanners were still picking up on that and reporting. So it was important for us to go all the way back to the root and rebuild and redeploy a complete new crypto system. There were outages all the time. Well, it was too frequent, and we had a lack of notification. I guess another way of saying is that the notification would come an hour too late, and usually from the wrong people. One example of this was we had an HR. This is where people can see their paychecks and whatnot, and unfortunately we had an outage. The certificate had expired, and nobody was aware of it because it was an internal certificate. And And not only that, but the certificate, which had additional subject alternative names on it, was deployed in multiple servers throughout our network. And without a complete visibility into where that certificate resided, that troubleshooting was a rather difficult day. So certificate outages, that's a big one. I bet that's probably a reason why a lot of us are listening in today. Lack of self-service. We've got various individuals that are in charge of their certificates, yet there was no central pane of glass. There was no means to see their catalog of certificates. It's rather unintuitive and kind of voodoo-like. Let's face it, SSL TLS is a bit of a unique challenge, and we didn't know who owned those certificates. How did this slip through? When did she leave the company? Right? We got that kind of story, and every time we wanted to regenerate, it would be like starting all over. And of course, now that Safari has moved its browser, Safari just announced that it's going to be not honoring certificates beyond 13 months, which means this whole regeneration process is just going to happen quicker and quicker. And, that's kind of the momentum. So we've had visibility issues, no idea what was on our network, multiple CAs, self-signed certificates all over the place, which are vulnerable to man-in-the-middle attacks, weak keys, SHA-1. So there was a whole host of challenges, Murali.
Yep. So yeah, that's in line with what we see in the industry as well, right? So let's look at quite a few obstacles that we have seen in real world customer environments as well, right? So one of the biggest challenges is, the manual configuration or manual management of the whole process. And then because the decentralized nature, right, because each application manages it and all that, the decentralized nature always has some challenges in enforcing policy, right? Every customer, every enterprise has a certificate policy, a security policy. But then enforcing it from a certificate management perspective, the ciphers, the algorithms that they can use, the protocols and the key sizes, all that, right? Because it is scattered, that becomes a bigger challenge, right? And similarly, because it is distributed, regenerating or renewing, even replacing with a new certificate becomes a challenge as well, because the person who's responsible for that would have left the company, and then a new consultant or new employee takes over. And then not having a central visibility is another bigger challenge that we have faced, especially for the global information security team or the cybersecurity team, or the CISOs. That is one of the biggest challenges, not able to see across the board. And beyond all that, every customer or every prospect, every enterprise would have faced some issue or the other with certificate outages. Right? We would like to know if any of you faced a similar approach as well, or similar challenges.
Another one that I think just drives people nuts is the insecure method of sharing keys, right? You probably have customers that have said that the way that they share keys is over email. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah. So just in my previous life, there was a large conference with a project conference, right? Conference call with close to 100 people on the call, right? And somebody said, "Oh, we don't have the keys," and some guy sends an email with reply all to everybody in the meeting, and then says, "Here's the key," right? Not knowing the criticality of it, right? And I mean, it's the thing is, he had access to the key. He thought people were looking for it, so he just sent it away, right? So I think removing that human component is one of the critical aspects. One, educating them, and then putting all the guardrails and all that, right? And then how can we prevent such catastrophic failures is something that we need to look at.
Right.
Yeah, I think we're going to take a quick pause for a poll. I think we'd also like to know from everyone who's joined the webinar as to how many of you have faced the similar challenges that Jeff spoke about with his PKI. So I'm going to quickly bring up a polling window, and if you can answer that, that'll be great. I think I'm just going to leave the poll running, so anyone who joins later can take it. But I think over to you, Jeff.
Okay, great. We'll talk about our goals at this point. So again, this is a 2018 project that I think had been on the table for a couple of years, and finally there was a real commitment by leadership to get this resolved. And so there was a meeting of about 15 people, and leadership decided, they brought in some external consultants, and ultimately we really decided on 3 very high objectives. And that was, number one, we want to make this easy to use for the end users, right? This isn't something that they do every day. How is it that we can help our application teams to get the certificate services that they need in a way that they can consume easily? Next thing is to securely deploy, right? So let's put an end to this, sending private keys over email. Let's see if we can figure out a rock solid secure solution by which we can deploy certificates and keys through this centralized system. And the third real high objective was in terms of network visibility. We had no idea what was sitting on our network. We had a vulnerability scanners, and ultimately integrating with that scanner really helped us to gain traction in knowing where are those self-signed certificates, which servers do they reside on, which ports do they sit on. Let's interrogate each one and put them in an inventory. So those were the real high level objectives, and then we kind of fleshed out those objectives into things like notifications and ownership, inventory, easy renewals, right? These are just kind of the day in, day out operational tasks that happen. Over on the right side here, centralized ownership. So we wanted to have a centralized pane of glass and be able to map our certificates to security groups. So that the application support people can go into a self-service portal. They can see the inventory of their 5 or 6 certificates that their team individually owns and operate in those. I'll give you an example. Is with our customer portal group, we've got a world-class customer portal where our energy customers can perform their billing operations, turn up, turn down service, go onto the outage map. They can go to the energy squad or savings programs, etc. And those folks have a lot of certificates to manage, and it's awfully convenient for them to be able to go in there and if they need to, worst comes to worst, it hasn't happened, but worst comes to worst, if there's a private key compromise, they can initiate that revocation right within that portal, and then it elevates to approval and whatnot. Also, with respect to policy and process, there's kind of a standardized process with policy enforcement. There's a smooth UI and workflow that helps us drive our policy and process. And along with that, it's subject to the vulnerability scanner. So we're trying to delight our customers, and I think one of the ways to really, if you want a certificate lifecycle management system that really succeeds, there's that endpoint, the ability to deploy to endpoints and mastering your devices. So this means that vendors and devices are key. Get to know your devices. Get to know how do those devices How do they consume certificates? Are they in PEM? Are they in DIR? Are they PFX format? Which directories do they get deployed to? Become familiar with which devices you have in your inventory and get to know those. Some examples for us, I mean, obviously we've got a lot of Windows servers and workstations, load balancers, application delivery controllers, and an assortment of various network and compute infrastructure. So Murali, I know that your application, AppViewX certainly works with a lot of vendors. Could you speak to us on the next slide here?
Yep, definitely. So we'll definitely talk about the platform, AppViewX CLM platform as a whole. See, one of the key things that I've realized in my previous life is that the project management cost to upgrade and to maintain a platform is way higher than the product cost itself. So one of the key things that I drove, once I joined AppViewX is to make sure that the platform is built in a way that it caters to such a multitude of ecosystems, but at the same time, it is not that you're stuck with it to upgrade, where you have to coordinate and then orchestrate with all the different teams in trying to move that. So to address that, what we have done in this is we have built a modular low-code platform, right? It's a microservices-based modular low-code platform, and it has an ecosystem of a huge ecosystem of vendors that we constantly keep adding. And it's a plugin based architecture. So it's almost like a Linux server, right? So if you want to upgrade a Linux server, you upgrade the RPMs, whatever RPMs that you want. You rarely upgrade the kernel. I mean, you would, but then not as frequently as you would upgrade the plugins. Similarly, the platform is set up in such a way that the services, the core platform need not be updated frequently, and it is built with a plugin-based architecture, so that if you want to support new vendors, especially in Xcel Energy as well, right? When there are new vendors, new versions that they want to support, right? They don't have to update the whole platform, but then they can update the plugins, right? And with the plugin-based architecture, it also makes it easier for the agile delivery team to also deliver new services. And a couple of interesting points I want to touch upon in the platform is that with the low-code studio, we can build an automation workflow that caters to your business process, like the individual user's business process to automate. So in this particular case, the Windows team would want it a certain way with certain approvals and certain flows and all that, whereas the F5 team would want it a different way. So we have the capability to rather configure those using a low-code studio and also enable the self-service with pages. So with a couple of other customers, what we have done is we have actually replaced their existing page that they would have had and enhanced it with additional services by building a page which looks similar to what they are used to and all that. And you can also define journeys, which basically maps their user journey and supports across the board, both their private data centers and public cloud as well. Pretty extensive platform that we have built.
Yeah, thank you. That's utilizing this AppViewX platform, we were able to get past our issues and further our cybersecurity goals. So you talked about the journey. I'd like to share a little bit about Xcel Energy's journey. We have our project management office has rolled out a plan, build, run breakdown of project delivery. And for us, it started with defining our problem statement, and that means getting yourself a good PM and documenting your project charter and moving into requirements and the PKI environment, of course, relies heavily upon a CPCPS, the Certificate Policy and Certificate Practices Statement. From there, we went into detailed design documents, which is network and security documents, and then vendor procurement. For Xcel Energy, we talked to the folks over at Gartner, and we opened up an RFP. And then once we did our bake-off between 3 different vendors, we went and did some reference calls, and those reference calls were really important. I would encourage anybody that goes through this journey to make those reference calls and find other people that have gone through these crypto systems rebuilds and hear from the horse's mouth, what challenges they faced and how did they go about solving their problems. Next, within the build environment, we built it all the way ground up, which means infrastructure and hardware security modules and offline root CAs, and then we implemented our certificate lifecycle management package. And part of that is the integration that took place. There's all sorts of key integrations that can help to make your tool a truly useful one. I did mention integrating with the vulnerability scanner, and that was really, really key for us. Our director of cybersecurity engineering is very keen on vulnerability reports, and I know that those reports and audits are carefully paid attention to. We also did integration, of course, with LDAP-S and the CAs, and we did a stopgap integration with our IT service management layer as well. We intend to go farther on that one, bringing in integration eventually with change management, incident management, problem management, et cetera. And then finally, in the run department, operational readiness, which means documenting your run books, doing continuous testing, making sure that you're support ready. So this kind of allowed us to do, once we had this set up, we're able to give kind of one-on-one support. And one-on-one support oftentimes means that somebody with a certificate need will come to us and we'll look at their network diagrams, understand their clients, their servers, the network devices, and understand what their application requirements are. So that probably sounds like the typical day in, day out of a lifecycle management engineer is somebody coming with a certificate need. Yeah. So let's if Murali, any thoughts or comments on that, or should I talk about our key use cases?
Yeah, I guess you can continue on. I think this is all your internal process that you have used to take the journey through. Right? I think key use cases is where definitely we would like to hear what made you focus on AppViewX, especially how did you implement AppViewX and all that?
Yes, yeah. So for those that were at RSA conference this year, you heard me talk about event-driven automation, and I like to use the example of the Logitech Harmony remote. Those universal remote controls, which they're award-winning designs, and the beautiful thing about that and the way that AppViewX designed an interface for us is we did this high-level abstraction, right? We exposed only the tip of the iceberg to the end user. Look, they don't live day in, day out with SSL TLS. Their primary job is application support, and certificates is something that they, we want them to know enough, but we also know that there's a bit of voodoo behind it. So the nice thing about this event-driven automation is that we're just abstracting the high-level stuff, and meanwhile, the low-level automation behind the scenes is what ultimately does the CSR generation and the email notification, enrollment, approvals, signing, deployment, inventory, discovery. That's kind of the magic behind the scenes in terms of automation. And for the self-service portal, the app teams had a complete visibility of all their certificates. And then, in terms of integration, this API integration with our vulnerability scanner meant we didn't have to do any extra port scanner needed. And of course, our cybersecurity vulnerability team appreciates that when we don't have to introduce an extra vulnerability scanner involved.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we have seen this happen in a couple of other customers as well, where if they already have some sort of scanners, and if we can bolt on, or if we can integrate with it, right, instead of having another discovery system, which would basically go discover all their networks. We have done integrations with Qualys, and in your case, it was Rapid7, where we took the data from Rapid7 scans and used that from an automation perspective. So from a discovery perspective, it made it a lot more easier. Similarly, in the self-service portal perspective, right? There's a large logistics chain. The way they want it is for each of the teams, right? Very specific information, only that is relevant to them was needed to be presented. So they were using the low-code pages. They were able to define the pages for the different teams and basically delegate so that they can self-serve themselves and all that. So I guess it's high level. Everybody is looking for a similar approach, whether it is event-driven automation or self-service and all that, or even like the scanners, right? Especially when we go to different environments, there is always some scanner that's there, and integrating with that makes it a lot more easier.
Right. And then we dealt with the entire life cycle of the process. So everything from create to revoke to deploy, and we have you folks created a workflow for us that allows us to even change ownership of the certificate. Certificates used to be they were requested by an individual, and then 18 months they'd leave and they weren't owned by groups. And of course, then you'd get the notification from the wrong people that there's an outage. Other use cases that we had, I guess if we talk about some of the technical details, we had whether it's just TLS for web servers or code signing, cross-forest enrollment, and Wi-Fi. Folks can get on our Wi-Fi network because of the client certificates that are distributed to each of our laptops and desktops. So that's how we perform that. Document signing. The document signing certificates. This is kind of interesting. This is a very timely topic. The coronavirus has caused us to reevaluate how we sign and validate signatures. And with so many folks working from home nowadays, we needed a solution that was going to facilitate digital signatures. So deployment through AppViewX has helped a number of our leadership team to utilize certificates from our public CA. And then finally on the slide here, it is alerts and monitoring, which I guess we're kind of saving the best for last year. Shout out to Jerry from our Integrated Operations Center here. We finally got our expiration notices fairly under control. So Jerry, you can stop calling me at 3 a.m. Yeah. So how about you? What do you think? What do other customers see? For those?
Yes, so this is in line and similar ways, right? So especially when we look at renewal, revocation, and enrollment, and even deployment and binding. So each this is where there is no one size fits all, right? Because for example, there could be a WebSphere team who has their own automation to automate certificate deployment. All they want is they want the certificate to be available, and then they would take it from there, right? Because they would have their own change management process and all that. Now with the Automation Studio, what we have done is we integrate. We have something called Bring Your Own Automation, right? You can actually use your own Ansible scripts to basically be called from AppViewX and trigger the workflow. We will basically create a change ticket for them and whatnot. So they can decide whether it needs to be fully automated or semi-automated and whatnot, right? And then in certain cases, the renewal, they would want fully automated renewal where we basically go generate the certificate and generate the certificate from the CA, rather request a certificate from the CA, right? After generating the key and CSR and all that, and then keep it all ready so that the end teams during the change want to implement. There are other customers who want to do all that automatically. There are certain customers who want to trigger everything because there's a cost involved with the certificate creation and all that. So this is one area where we have a pretty good handle on and have addressed a whole bunch of processes. From an alerting perspective, there are again different approaches that customers have faced. Integration with different systems. We've done, again, the low-code capability, right? And the studio integration is what helps us in all these aspects.
Mm-hmm. Cool. I'd like to share with you a little bit about how we achieved our results. So in terms of the time savings, this event-based automation, it really ended up absolutely delighting our end users. They're really, really happy and surprised at how easy it is to request their certificates. And these folks, they don't live in PKI shoes. They don't live and breathe this. And so it's really important to make this easy for folks. Our notifications, we now have proactive notifications. It's not perfect, it's getting better. But now folks are getting emails, 23 months after they request certificates. We're going to have to shorten that down to 12 months, like I said, because of Apple's Safari browser and their policy. 100% visibility into PKI. Look, we've got, we do a complete discovery from all of our CAs, public and internal. We do discovery from our vulnerability scanners. We know what lives where. And we know where our weak keys are. We know where our self-signed certificates are. We do have that visibility now. Self-service and automation, yep, for request and deployment especially. And standardized cryptographic policies. We can finally get rid of those SHA-1 based certificates. And then last is the compliance reporting. Remember that audit every 6 weeks? Well, we'll be pretty much ready. So it's along the way. It's been a lot of fun. It's hard work. It's never easy. But if you're not having fun, you're not doing it right.
Right. Glad that you're able to achieve all these results, Jeff.
Yeah. It's important to get the right people on board.
Right.
It's largely about the relationships. So the next we're going to talk about some best practices here. Some things that sometimes you learn the hard way and sometimes you get lucky. If I were to tell anybody, give anybody a suggestion, it would be to integrate with your DNS management system. You know, if anything should get a standing ovation, it should be the idea of establishing DNS ownership at the time of DNS zone record request. You know, certificates are just most often tied to DNS records, and if you know who owns that DNS zone record, you know, in terms of ownership of certificates, they're directly tied to one another. So do your best out there. Try to get a handle of DNS records. Otherwise, you know, you're going to have to do it at the certificate level, and group that piggyback if you can. You know, group it and piggyback it, and map it to your security groups. That's what we ended up doing. So we have a tie into our directory services system, and now certificates are tied directly to our AD security groups. So next would be integration, right? We integrated with a number of different services, and integration always makes your systems more powerful, gives your systems the intelligence that they need. And of course, we're collecting data all the time, and we can run some statistics on that data. Automation wherever possible. Yep, that's that event-based, event-driven automation. Is, you know, what's underneath the iceberg, what's actually happening beneath the scenes. And I shouldn't make it sound like an iceberg is a bad thing. Well, of course it's a bad thing, but what I'm getting to there is of course that there's a lot of stuff that's kind of hidden from our end users. And you know, when we can automate it, they don't have to understand the nuances of what goes into the cryptographic key generation or the certificate enrollment process when you have a top level layer that can do those things for you. And then best practices: pick a suitable vendor. You know, pick somebody that's going to go the long haul with you. Somebody that shares your vision. Somebody that's willing to put in the time and energy. And that's the hugest difference maker. You know, ultimately what we're doing here is we're trying to produce systems that human beings are going to consume. And it's going to be human beings that, you know, that go into work and come home from work and they want to be delighted. They want to find enjoyment in their jobs. And in order to perform something like that, you need to find the right team of people that are willing to share the journey with you. And we've had a solid experience in doing that. You know, AppViewX, your team has put in a whole lot of hours for us, and yeah, it's been a super journey. So very, very happy. Pick a suitable vendor.
Yep, definitely. It's definitely a partnership, you know, to get to value, right? Especially, you know, when there is you know, when there is a lot of different systems involved, and we are looking to automate the whole process, right? And while talking about it, some of the things to be cautious about, right? While implementing the solution, right? Every change there is a cost. Now, whether it is a manual change and how it can be automated is something that you need to look for, right? And that is where the time to value comes in, right? Now, if manually, if they were taking 10 steps, if you give them the same experience in one step or even no steps at all, you know, that's a huge saving, and then it also enables adoption. That's one of the key things that you need to look for, right? If it is one step and you're making it 5 steps, right, or even 2 steps, that is going to be a huge hurdle to jump through, or rather to adapt, right? And then the key aspect is to look at, you know, what is the long-term and short-term or immediate-term objectives. Now, if you look at, you know, getting what do you call the longest poll to be completed immediately, right? Then it'll take a while for you to achieve the results, right? But then if there are some quick wins that you can achieve, right, and then progressively improve on it, that is something that definitely need to be cautious about. And then time and again, what we have seen is a lot of legacy systems which have not not able to adapt or to be automated. Though we have a programmable connector, which sort of helps you to automate any black box, but if the system only supports SHA-1, right, and you have to make an exception. So those are some of the things that you should be cautious about. I think there are definitely a lot of devices and closets, especially in legacy environments, right? And then how the policies and practices, the different teams' policies and practices. It is something that to be cautious about, meaning how do we walk the fine line where we want to partner with all the different teams to embrace security. It's a carrot and stick model, right? So technically every problem can be solved, but then politically it becomes a different challenge. So how do we work through those is something that definitely needs to be cautious about, I guess.
Mm. You know, speaking of teams, I wanted to encourage anybody that's out there in the utilities sector, you know, please, you know, feel free and you know, look me up. My boss has been very generous. My boss is Britt Kronkowski, and he's been very, very supportive of saying that if we can help others in the energy and utilities sector to achieve a secure solution, you know, let's invest a few hours here and there to make sure that we have a solid energy grid across the board. So please, you know, and I want to thank, you know, Murali, I want to thank you very much for this opportunity to discuss our journey here at Xcel Energy.
Definitely, thanks, Jeff. Just definitely a pleasure, and pleasure working with you from the beginning. Right, I still remember the first meeting where we presented our solution to where we have come. I know it's a long journey, but definitely you know, it's a memory. Right? So now with that, we come to the end of the session. So if you have any questions, you can type in the Q&A window, or you can type in the chat window. I think we did receive a couple of questions on the chat window. I think the question from Edward is, who was the CA during issues, and what type of notification was in place?
Yeah, so the specific example that I gave, this was an internal CA for us. You know, we had the benefit of at least with our external public CA, there were email notifications built in. Now, you know, unfortunately, usually people put in their individual email address instead of a team DL. So we're trying to encourage people to do team DLs, but also even when they log into the system, we do a lookup into the privileged access management system, and we see which groups that they belong to. So, you know, with respect to the individual CA before, well, you know, we didn't even have that advantage of having the certificate management layer sitting on top. It was talking directly to the CA, and you know, just individuals were going in. So, you know, and that kind of leads, I see another question on the board here is, you know, I made a comment, when did she leave the company and how did we overcome this? Well, that's the perfect example, right? I mean, you know, Xcel Energy, we have a number of contractors, and it's not just contractors, it's individuals, but the individuals would make the individual certificate request, and all we had knowledge of at that time is really just the individual user. And, you know, look, you know, people come and go and they leave companies or they change teams, and next thing you know, you've got a certificate outage and that individual is no longer with the company. So it's really important to tie your certificates to groups, right? Groups that are going to be persistent.
Yeah, and there's another question from an anonymous attendee. How important was automation in picking the right CLM vendor?
Well, I think that's pretty much I've been in IT for 25 years, and I feel like ever since I was programming when I was 12 years old, the name of the game has always been about automation. That things are always, you need to build scalable solutions, and you can't build scalable solutions without automation. So that was absolutely always at the core of what we're trying to do.
Okay. There's another question: how self-signed certificates were handled by Xcel in this journey of lifecycle automation?
One at a time. So self-service certificates, we can see those within our inventory, but it's really up to it's those application teams and the vulnerability folks that then obtain who owns the CI, where they reside, and let's get those replaced. So it's utilizing the reports that are built in, that are integrated, and then tackling especially the more popular critical applications. We have an understanding of what the critical applications are, what the critical configuration items and servers are. So that's what we tackle first.
Right. And then there's another question: how do you handle or view wildcards?
Oh, those are a no-no. Companies like Entrust, DigiCert, GlobalSign, they don't even issue wildcards that I know of, and we do the same thing. It's against our policy. We don't issue out wildcard certificates, and so there's the answer.
And from what Jeff described, can we call it was more of lack of governance, which was achieved by revamping the operations and realigning ownership?
Murali, is there a question in there?
Yeah, so I think what it's, I'm not sure if it's more of a statement. It says it was more lack of governance, which was achieved by revamping. Is that what was achieved using the CLM?
Well, that was certainly a key component there, because you can certainly standardize on your processes. You could standardize on your key generation. You can standardize on templates, governance, because there's always going to be this approval required. If I can kind of just circle back to the wildcard thing here. So I know that some companies out there might be thinking, but we really can't get around the wildcard thing. And my recommendation there is, generally you don't want to do wildcards. If you do absolutely have to do a wildcard, constrict it by the namespace. Make sure it's like a fourth level domain level subdomain. If you really want to constrict it, do it by namespace.
There are quite a few questions coming in, so we'll take maybe a few. How many staff look after the system?
We are looking for good employees. If you're interested in joining our team, we'll be happy to look over your application. I'm going to keep our staff size to a private conversation.
Okay, makes sense. How do you handle automatic push renewed certificates to devices like Tomcat, JBoss, HAProxy, and Azure Cloud?
Yeah, automating deployment, requires. So the one that we have automated most would be our LTMs, right? Our application delivery controllers. We don't yet deploy to the Tomcat, Red Hat, and Linux environments, but that's on our radar, and we expect to get that in the next year or so.
Okay, there's quite a few questions on post-quantum and quantum ready. Any thoughts on that, Jeff?
Yeah, well, we're keeping our eyes open to see which one NIST approves. You know, it's likely to be a lattice-based algorithm. You know, NIST has not yet defined which one is going to be quantum proof standardized. You know, we do have our HSMs at play, and our HSMs will be doing. Those are kind of first and foremost, you know, for our crypto processors. So I'm confident that that we'll be ready. It's definitely on our radar. It's something that we look at in the news all the time.
Okay, yep, makes sense. And there's a question about can this integrated with ServiceNow tool for approval cycle? Yes, it can be. We have integration to ServiceNow and pretty much all the ITSM tools. And then will the slides be published or could be delivered to us? I think you will have a recording that you can play back later. Are you integrating with Expanse and Expander tool? The way we have built the product, as I mentioned earlier, it's a plugin based architecture with which you can basically integrate different services with different systems and all that. How can you use this to push to containers? We have a container based plugin to automate the whole process. We can, you know, give you more detailed approach on how we do that. All right. So the poll results, Suesha, do you want to share that?
Yep. Yeah, I know in the interest of time, I'm just going to quickly share our polling results. So this is, you know, what we've received during the webinar today.
Oh, that's interesting. Well spread out. I think scattered ownership wins, it looks like, and certificate outages, a pretty close second, I guess. Low PKI visibility, and then I guess not many manual configuration errors. I guess the distributed team handles that. And no PKI self-service is difficult key regeneration. That's the least. Interesting.
Yep. Good. I'm just going to stop sharing the results right now. I think in the interest of time, Murali and Jeff, I'm going to wrap up the webinar today. So thank you so much, you know, for your time, and for all the attendees. You can definitely, you know, get the recording for today's webinar on, you know, the AppViewX website, and keep a lookout for other upcoming webinars as well. We thank everyone, especially Jeff and Murali, for your time today. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you.